Hi everyone. I wanted to go over our next assignment before we're done with our mannequins so that you can brainstorm and collect supplies. So instead of a traditional um, PowerPoint slide, I decided to make an Adobe Sparks for you guys. And so we're going to make a collage that documents our life. And so our target is to create a collage with innovative materials as well as traditional media to tell a story. So, first, we probably need to know what a collage is. So, when you look up collage on your computer, you'll probably find that it will autocorrect to college. But collage is actually a French term. It means to glue. And so artists will glue things to a surface to create imagery. So often they'll use found materials such as text, illustrations, um, photographs that they'll cut and paste together as well as draw into the media as well. And I'd like you to use both traditional and innovative materials. So, we're going to use the supplies that we have at home. Traditional would be things from the scavenger hunt. So, if you didn't complete the scavenger hunt, you can still do that survey. I think it's in week 3. I'll make sure that it's back out there for you. But you also want to use innovative materials. So maybe things that you wouldn't typically use in the art classroom, or you wouldn't do if you were just making a drawing and painting by itself. So, um, okay, so first things first is even before you begin, I would like you to select your theme. That theme is going to influence your background as well as whatever materials you collect to use for this. So you can illustrate a typical day for you or someone who lives with you. You could choose to illustrate a part of your day for the same thing for you or someone who lives with you, or you could illustrate the COVID-19 quarantine. Don't feel like you have to do that if it's too unsettling for you. But I'd like you to pick a theme. So think about what your life is like right now. Think about what you're doing with your day, your schoolwork, playing your video games, cooking, doing other artwork, going for walks, sleeping too much, whatever it is that you're doing, how can you illustrate that? And how can you use materials that highlight what you've been doing? I'm going to have you make a background. So the background could be on a surface that you have. So on the surfaces, it could be on a thicker paper, on cardboard, on canvas, on something that you have at home. And you could do something simple like a painted background. You could do watercolor washes or textures. You could do an overall pattern with acrylic. This one's pretty complicated, so don't feel like you have to do this. This looks like they used a palette knife and kind of scraped it through. Just be careful that if you do something that's really thick, you're going to probably need a stronger glue in order to glue things on top. So just keep that in mind. Also, you want to make sure that you tape down paper if you're going to paint on it to prevent warping. You can also repeat text. I actually did that for my example. I took a phrase and I repeated it over and over and over again. I chose "we will survive" and I actually altered it a little bit and I said "we will survive this and we will survive this together." And I used watercolor pencils, so I diluted it and painted with it as well. I actually got it from another art teacher who uses it in their collage work. Instead of just going one direction, right, they go multiple directions to create an overall pattern that's very hard to actually read. But you can leave it more open, like I did if you wanted to. You can also use a found surface. So you could, um, or created surface, you could take a thicker board and you could glue text on top of it. This, they look like they used gesso to suppress it a little bit, so to lighten it so that they could draw on top of it. If it was not done that way, you would have to use a lot of light materials to draw and paint on top of it. Musical sheet music. Looks like they maybe stained it with coffee or tea. You could use cardboard from like Amazon boxes. You could collage text into it. This one's more than just a background, but you can see that they use the cardboard and the text um, papers. But I gave you some other examples that you could use as well. Things like junk mail, magazines, receipts, printed imagery, old homework. You just want to make sure that you adhere it to a thicker board if your surface is thin. So you're going to make your imagery, arrange your composition, make sure you know what your composition is going to be before you glue anything down. And then you can always go back and work back into it if you need to. So I gave you an example of my process because I chose a wet media. I taped it down. I used the watercolor pencils with the text, right? And then I made my imagery to go on top of it, and I kind of played with composition. Because I cut my materials out before from the receipts, I had to put it on another surface to color it. And I didn't use fancy art materials for my example. I just used Crayola markers, right? I glued it down, right? So here's the first layer, arranged it to figure out my best layer. After I had glued it down, I thought maybe it was done, but I thought that it was hard to see some of the imagery because I felt like the background was very overwhelming. So I worked back into it with color pencil. I outlined some of the shapes to have them have a little bit more depth. And then I covered up some of the text so that you could see it a little bit better. So then there's my final image. This is only about 5 by 6. It's rather small. It doesn't have to be gigantic to be complicated, but you can work as large or as small as you want. I would probably say don't work any smaller than 4 by 5 because maybe you can use it for the 4 by 5 contest in the fall.